Say, kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but, in your car.
Jay Stevens, Mike the Intern, 104.7 The Cave. It is time for another episode of Dark Side of the Stream.
Dum-da-dum. Hang on, I'm finishing my nuts.
Yeah, Jay's going to eat, and I'll just get into what we talked about. This week on Dark Side of the Stream, we watched the documentary White Boy on Netflix that just premiered this past month. It was released about 3 years ago. It came out on Stars, I think, in 2019. Netflix. Yeah, it's been out for a little bit. But those of us that do not have cable finally got a chance to watch it.
Those of us that pirate the things we watch.
Yeah, we're not not us.
We don't get the debuts.
We don't do that at all. So we watched the documentary White Boy, which is about a guy who, at the age of 14, was asked to be an informant with the FBI. His name was Richard Wersch Jr. Werschy or Wersch? I can't remember if it's Wersch.
Yeah, it was something like
that. Jr. Now, how did a 14-year-old get involved with the FBI? Well, his dad was a gun seller and would go to these gun shows, and his kid was always there with him, and White Boy Rick. And he was helping his dad sell guns. His dad was also selling guns in the black market to a lot of cocaine dealers in Detroit, and we'll get to that in a minute. But basically, he was also informing on who he was selling these guns to the FBI, and come to find out, the FBI noticed that his son is the one with all the information. So the FBI guy that they had in the documentary is like, okay, this isn't a good call.
Yeah, man, this is some shady stuff.
Not Detroit PD. Not Detroit PD. Detroit PD would take him out we're talking about a 14, 15-year-old kid here. Take him out downtown Detroit to clubs all night, and he would just sit in the car and pick these kids up, and then he was expected to go to school the next day at 7 in the morning. Did that actually happen? No way. But he said that he was like, look, I got to go to school. And they were like, what's more important? Helping us bust guys? So the first question.
Right, very random that they would do that,
Very random? Well, how many times have we talked about that, what lengths a law enforcement sometimes will go to make an arrest? Is it worth corrupting a 14-year-old boy to make this happen? And we'll get to, because when you start watching this, there's so many different layers to this onion of this guy's story.
The kid was also a big drug baller, right?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute, but it didn't start out that way. He was an informant until that happened, and we'll get to that in a minute. But there were so many different people that failed this kid that it's unbelievable. First, let's start with his dad. You got him involved in this crap. I mean, come on, dude, for real? Like, you're going to let your 14-year-old kid be an informant? To what end? Okay? The FBI, they kind of see this road where it's going down. They're like, supposedly.
Right. Yeah,
this guy said
a lot of this is allegedly.
But then I'm sure there were some agents that did. Definitely, he was saying, no, Detroit PD was all over it, and they were. But he started informing on these guys. He got involved with what was it? What brothers? What were they called? I can't remember. It was like
they were the big kingpins,
they broke it. They show you a picture of Detroit. And they show you where all the gangs have their people, and he went in with one and basically came as like lieutenant and started bringing them up, which is also crazy because this is, again, a 15-year-old white boy, and all of these gangs did not have white people in their organization.
It was crazy, man. It was crazy.
But somehow he was finding out all this stuff, and we will continue to talk about this long and winding road known as White Boy Rick, Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.
Say, kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but, in your car.
Dark Side of the Stream, 104.7 The Cave. Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens in the studio today discussing White Boy, documentary about White Boy Rick, which, by the way, he didn't give himself that nickname. Neither did any of the drug dealers he worked with. No one ever referred to him as White Boy Rick. The news media referred to him
name up
as White Boy Rick. Now, here's the other thing about this. Again, so many people failed him. It is so hilarious in this documentary of all the finger pointing going on.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The feds, they're pointing at the police. The police were corrupt as hell, and they didn't point at anybody because most of them are locked up. And we'll get to that in a minute. The media points fingers. People point fingers at the media. Dude, Chris Hansen, To Catch a Predator guy, he blew this kid up and made it so much bigger. And they were like, were they falsehoods? Well, we were just reporting what the police were telling us. Come on, guys. Was it really legitimate that a 15-year-old kid was responsible for murders and all this stuff? The myth got so big. That's all I had ever heard about.
Right.
They had this movie.
You hear about the myth.
Yeah. That's all I'd ever heard about.
And I thought this 15-year-old kid that was a big drug kingpin.
I thought that was the case. I really did.
But yeah, digging deeper, it turns out not really. He was
what ended up happening.
He was sucked in this lifestyle, and became an informant. Really,
the gang finds out that this stuff's getting out. White boy Rick gets shot in the stomach.
Yeah.
Survives it somehow. And the task force at this point could have said, you know what?
This is too dangerous. No.
This 15-year-old kid almost got killed. We need to pull the brakes. Because if this kid dies, it's all on us.
All right.
Instead, they say, no. This gives him more credibility.
Yeah.
Let's go further.
And it actually did.
And it did.
The guys that shot him became his homies again.
Until the feds were like, we got all we want, and they kick him to a curb. Now, what is a kid who has all he's done? He's pretty much out of school at this point because he hasn't been going for a year or so. Longer.
All he knows.
What does he do? All he knows is what they showed
scene.
him how to do, and that's what he starts doing. He starts selling cocaine, and that I'm not saying he would admit to you that that was wrong, and it was wrong, but this guy spent almost 30 years in prison for that. Now, the hitman that they have on this show, that dude Nate.
Woo, yeah.
Unbelievable. He only served, 13 years, 14 years? He openly admitted to 30 killings. He spent half of the time that White Boy Rick spent in jail. Now, let's get into the reason
why. And he was after White Boy Rick, but now he's like on his side. He's like, it's crazy. They should let him out.
And who wanted White Boy Rick killed? None other than Inspector Todd from Beverly Hills Cop.
Our favorite actor from Beverly Hills Cop.
Dude, that is my favorite part.
This is the weird part. This is where it gets weird.
And I hate this guy. I mean, Gil, dude, that guy, I had no idea what Gil Hill was involved in. I thought he was just an actor. I had no idea that he was actually a homicide detective from Detroit. And I had no idea all this stuff was going on. Well, if you look in Detroit in the 80s, there was a ton of corruption from the mayor on down. And Gil and the mayor were tight. The mayor had a niece who was married to one of the drug pins and literally sent the cops to follow her 24/7 to make sure she didn't get killed or anything.
Yeah, protected. Yeah.
And he was, in essence, protected to a fault, too. Mm-hmm. And he didn't get busted. I mean, they were talking about stories where the police would say, oh, we see it, but don't worry about it. Just keep on going.
Yep.
The Gil at one point went up to the hitman and said, who do you got on your list? Don't touch them. The other ones I don't care about.
Yep.
So obviously, since Gil tried to run for mayor of Detroit and felt like White Boy Rick put the kibosh on this, or his dealings and all this stuff squandered him, the belief is that at every turn, Gil did everything to keep him in. Because even when they went to appeals in 2013, the prosecutor stomped her foot down and said no.
Yep.
Well, guess who she was friends with?
Yep.
Gil. At every single turn until this. Because then in 2016, he passes away, and guess what?
And all of a sudden, now they're
no, it's cool. Let him out.
Yeah,
Cool.
It was some shady stuff, man.
Which, by the way, after he gets released in Michigan, he had some hand in some theft ring with his sister and his mom. So then he has to take the rap for that and go spend 5 years in Florida.
Crappy. But like all the downfall of many things, like the Beatles, starts with the girl.
Well,
we'll get into that next.
We'll talk about how he got busted and who he got busted with next. Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.
Say, kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but in your car.
Jay Stevens, Mike the Intern in the studio discussing White Boy documentary about White Boy Rick on Netflix on Dark Side of the Stream. So, as Jay mentioned, White Boy Rick, it all comes to an end when the feds raid his house. He is caught in bed with none other than the Kingpin's wife at the time, who actually the Kingpin was in prison at this point. She was out. And it was the mayor's niece. He was found in bed with her, which 17-year-old kid, obviously she wasn't 17, but it must have made him feel like he had some gall.
He was the man.
And I'm sure he did at the time. Now, he definitely did not deserve to spend 30 years in jail. The judges tried to get him out, but again, everyone that seemed to be associated with Gil Hill did everything they could.
Yeah, very weird,
stop
man.
it.
Just like blackballed him.
It's crazy. I mean, they tried to get him killed. Nate, the hitman, tried a couple times, but definitely couldn't. And even he went to court after he got released. Is like, you need to let this guy out. The feds that were the good feds tried to get him out. Obviously, some of the police officers were asked to do everything they can to keep him in. Even one of the homicide detectives was like, we were told to speak in generalities, but they were obviously putting these two guys together. Like all the crime in Detroit was somehow, created by this kid, which was not the fact. It was just, he just kept getting screwed by the system.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. So after we finished this documentary, I kind of go through and I'm like, oh my God, where are some of these characters, right? They all got to be living, right? Well, first of all, the guy who directed this documentary, Sean Retch, is from Independence, Missouri.
Hey,
you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
So let's start with the hitman, Nate Boone Craft, openly admitted to 30 killings in court. He was released. He is a free man, and I think he's living in Detroit right now with just like 4 bottom teeth. But
Baller.
dude,
Baller,
I would not cross that dude at all. And by the way, they were called the Curry brothers. And speaking of which,
that's right.
Where is Jonathan Curry? Johnny Curry, still in Detroit, and he's out.
Chilling.
150 to, I think that at one point they said he was responsible from 150 to 200 million drug sales in his period, which is just unbelievable. Kathy Volson, the niece of the mayor who was with Johnny and then eventually White Boy Rick, she turned state's evidence, went into drug rehab, and just kind of lives a quiet life somewhere else. Obviously, life and luxury. And the White Boy actually helped set her up, and that's part of the reason why he thinks, even though he went after them to kind of turn key on them after he got busted, he thinks that's the reason why he got messed up. Now, where is White Boy Rick now?
Where is White Boy Rick now?
He was finally released last year in July. And I guess the lawyer that helped him get out gave him a job. And so he's part of like trying to help prisoners that have been in for a long time reacclimate to the real world and get them employment,
Good
housing,
for
and all
Rick.
that stuff.
There
So
you go.
he's trying to give back as well. He's still with his I guess baby mama, the girl that he had kids with, or someone that he'd been with since like junior high, on and off in between all the craziness. So, you know, even though he lost 30, I mean, I'm 38 years old, dude.
Right.
That's literally all my life. I would have been arrested, put in jail at 8 years old, and I'd be getting out right now. That's unbelievable.
But and now and then they made a big movie about him with Matthew McConaughey in there, so
Which
he's
didn't
probably
get
got
a lot
some
of
paid.
great reviews.
Didn't get reviews.
No, well, they say Matthew McConaughey's performance is really good, but the script is kind of meh.
He's always good.
I hope
good looking dude.
I hope at the end of the day, White Boy Rick can make some money off of this story somehow. He definitely deserves it. They did not need to send this kid 30 years in prison. And like they explain in the documentary, just making the punishment more severe does not deter anything at all. If there is a way to make money or an ends to your means, the punishment does not matter because you got a chance to get away with it, just like we got a chance to win the lottery. So at the end of the day, man, I felt bad for White Boy Rick. I really, really did. We will talk next our ratings. I don't know what we're going to call this. I don't know what our rating system for this one's going to be. We'll figure it out.
Bags of cocaine.
Could be. Or, I don't know. White boys. Whatever. Either way, we'll figure it out next Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.
Say, kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but, in your car.
Mike, the intern, Jay Stevens on 104.7 The Cave. It's Dark Side of the Stream. We are discussing White Boy, the documentary about White Boy Rick from Detroit. And now we have come to the conclusion of our episode. Before we go, though, I would like to say that when they were talking about White Boy Rick's dad, the person I kept thinking about was Jay Stevens. They were like, man, he always had some kind of angle, always some side hustle. And I was like, you know what? I know a guy that does that.
That is so Jay Stevens.
He always got some stuff going, boy.
Now, let me tell you guys something. Look, if you have your hand in several streams of money, if one falls apart, you're okay because you got a couple other side hustles going. So always have several side hustles going, kids.
Jay likes to throw everything he can at the wall, and eventually something sticks.
Exactly.
So
sometimes it's your underwear.
Our rating system in this episode of White Boy Rick will be kilos of cocaine. How many kilos would you give it?
Out of 5?
Yeah.
2.5.
I'd say about 3.
Yeah, 2.5. It was nothing crazy, but it was an interesting story.
It was crazy for me.
The best part about it was
Inspector Todd, man.
Was Inspector Todd? Yeah, the actor from Beverly Hills Cop.
I was hoping our GM he's not here today, but he was from Detroit he was in Detroit for a long time. I was hoping
he might know White Boy Rick.
And say, hey, what's the deal about Gil? What's the deal about the corruption in Detroit?
He might know White Boy Rick.
Want to get your hands? He might know. Definitely might know.
He might be White Boy Rick's dad.
Could know Chris Hansen too.
Down here in hiding.
So 2.5 to 3 kilos.
He knows Larry King. I mean, he probably could.
Out, man, yeah. Well, either way, White Boy Rick, watch it. Sad story. Don't become an informant for the police. And the end of the story is, yes, snitches get stitches, or in this case, 30 years. So don't be a snitch and just don't get involved in that stuff. Jay, it's your turn for the next episode. What are we watching in the next
I think we're going with an oldie but a goodie, Grizzly Man.
Grizzly Man. We'll get
Story
to talk
of a guy that went and lived with bears every summer for many, many years and filmed it all.
We'll talk about my time and outdoors and in the Boy Scouts as well, because I'm sure I'll find some similarities between the two.
You and the Grizzly Man have a lot of things in common.
That's right. Remember, you can like, subscribe, share this podcast, Dark Side of the Stream, wherever you get it, and tell your friends it's Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.